So they went through the traditional ways of getting me back to my feet, not medical.
Okay.
Because the medical had failed. They saw me from walking to crippling, and it was not working. So ultimately, in the long run, I was like a late state starter. Getting traditional intervention wasn't working. Ultimately, I had to be carried by my mother, assisted by my mother while my parents were going to school. Once he walked into the church, prayer started. I got back my life because I was dying. And through life and history, I have lived my life as a person with disability who have succeeded in inspiring other children to live as a success story. It's fundamental because disability has no respect for any person. A friend of mine, Mr. Ibu, he's a Nollywood actor. God bless him. Recently he had 7 surgery and he got one of his limbs amputated. The likes of Chinua Achebe was born without disability, but before Chinua Achebe died, had a fatal road accident, became a person with disability. And so the culture of buildings and the culture of development and the culture of governance must be inclusive. People must take into consideration the needs of the peculiarity of everybody.
In the words of R.J. Mate, who is an actor, once said, "A lot of people think that perfection is a 6-foot-tall, 100-pound meter, 45-kilogram model girl. I don't know what the world live in, but I don't see girls like that on the streets often or too often. I do see people with disabilities and diversities, and I think that's what we need to show as beauty and true, even with what people consider imperfections." Absolutely spot on. My next quote is from Sinead Burke, who is a writer, academic, activist, and broadcaster. She once said, "Disability is articulated as a struggle, an unnecessary burden that one must overcome to the soundtrack of a string crescendo. But disabled lives are multifaceted, brimming with personality, pride, ambition, love, empathy, and wit." I agree. And now I'll take my last one from Stella Young, who is a comedian, journalist, and activist. Once said, that quote, "The only disability in the life is a bad attitude. The reason that bull is no amount of smiling at a flight of stairs has ever made it turn into a ramp. No amount of standing in the middle of a bookshelf and radiating a positive attitude is going to turn all those books into a braille." All right, don't you just love this quote? Now let's see how this quote relates to what we'll be speaking about tonight. Warm greetings and welcome to D Conversation. We're reaching you from KAFTAN's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. I am Annabelle Oji. Now, if you listen to that quote, you'll definitely know where our conversation for today is tilted towards. So we'll be discussing with some beautiful persons as we'll be talking about the off-cycle election that just passed and how much we're bringing people with disabilities, that's those called PWDs, in inclusion or including them in our politics, governance, administration, and even as family as a whole, because a lot of people will tell you that, oh no, she is or he is albino, but they're not seeing the fact that they're human first. That's what we'll be discussing tonight. And my guest on the show today, I have 2 beautiful guests. My first one is Tiffany Bright, who is a dedicated communication officer at the African Center for Entrepreneurship and Information Development, known for her fervent advocacy for gender inclusivity and women empowerment in Nigeria. Great to have you on the show, Tiffany.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. And then my next guest here is Emeka Betram. He is the Executive Director, Persons with Disabilities Action Network, PEDANET. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. All
right, thank you all for coming. Okay, so now let's get right to our conversation for today, but we'll start with you, Tiffany. Okay. Now, kindly tell us, I've actually talked to some persons, and then when you tell them, okay, this person is, they're classified as those PWDs, as people living with disability, but then they tell you that because I am an albino, don't put me in that class. So what kind of treatments have you actually gotten from people, especially with the fact that when they have to classify these are people with disability, or these are just put this person in this? Just tell us your experience so far.
Well, based on my work, actually, so people with disability, they don't like the word PL, like people living with disability, like people with disability, So in my work, there is some research in my organization based on African Center, that's ACDF, that's where I work. So there are some works we are working on, and we've been working on that, and we'll keep working on that, that's involving people with disability, that's based on the Disability Act 2018, which states that every persons with disability has the equal right to participate in every decision making in the country. So people with disability, we work with them. There are some of them we work with, so we don't actually discriminate them. And if you're talking about the ones with, if you're talking about the albinos, right? So those ones, I wouldn't say, yes, actually, you're right when they say they don't like being classified with people with disability, but how can we say it? So we just...
So what class do you put them?
Well, the thing is...
Just so we learn.
No, treating these people, treat them with respect.
Yes, I understand.
Discriminate them. So we just assume and work with what they want. It's just what will suit them. We just try to work with them so that they'll fit in, or probably they'll work and they'll be part of the society. So the albinos, and we actually still put them with disability, but not really with disability.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll bring that same question to you, Emeka Betram. So like I said, I've talked to some persons, and then they will tell you that don't classify me among people. Okay, I think the word was don't classify me with people with special needs, or don't just classify me amongst people that's PLWD. I'm not among this. So how do you now classify these persons respectively if you have to talk to them?
For us, first, I must start by thanking you for this invitation. And I must say that people with disability are people with disabilities. The UN Convention on Rights of People with Disability classifies people with disabilities as people who have had cause to been affected by maybe the infrastructure, because there's social disability, there's medical, there's communication disability, there are things that disengages or empower people living with disability, or people with disabilities from attaining their dreams and aspirations. And I know in the course of our interactions with policymakers and organizations and institutions in breaking out from the woods, allowing our voice to count, because we always tell ourselves that nothing about us without us. There's a need for us to be, we started interacting with government policies, started reading, and we saw what the American Disability Act did in ensuring that people with disabilities who cut across sensory, autistic, cerebral, physical, those who are deaf, are incorporated into governance. And that's where the issue of inclusive governance comes in. There was a time in the past where we were saying that even people with albinism are not part of the community of people with disability.
Yes, I recall.
And then, of course, it was a very heavy debate, but from the global environment, it started coming in until we got into Nigeria, to where our friends and brothers like the likes of Jake Ekpele and others joined us and started driving it, because they themselves, if you take their magnified glasses from them, they may not be able to see.
So are you saying that it has all been marginalization before Jake Ekpele came in?
No, from the history of time, disability community has been marginalized. The Albino Foundation, the people living with albinism have also been marginalized, because if you look at the history of time, there was a time people who gave birth to twins, where the twins were disallowed. And for people with disability, there is this negative attitude towards them, there's stigma. And so many times when you get to homes, you see children who are born with disability, many of them in time past were murdered and killed. You understand? But when the issue of human rights, the rights of life of people started counting all over the world, disability movement, groups of civil society organizations started coming out to start advocating for the rights of people with disabilities. And of course, if you look at international platforms, you see that the one-time president of America, Theodore Roosevelt, governed from the wheelchair, you know, and we've seen the likes of Pella and others. And then you come into Nigeria, you see the likes of, in year 2000, the likes of Cosmos Okoli, myself, Dalami Bashiru, of Blessed Memory. I'm a police survivor. We got involved in the campaign and we started championing. And of course, we realized that the more, the merrier. And of course, we have our sisters and brothers who are people living with albinism, who have also been excluded, discriminated upon, dehumanized, you know, abused, subjugated, whose rights have been denied. They've been denied access to education, access to healthcare facilities, access to love by family, access to love by brothers and sisters, by the institutions, by policymakers. And we know that they are also part of the vulnerable groups of people who are also living with disabilities. So their skin impairment is one of the things that denies them access to being incorporated or being included into governance or into family life. And so they were brought into the whole thing. And so they're part of the population of over 33 million Nigerians living with disability today. And even all over the world, they are classified as people with disabilities.
Okay, so you've said like 1 million words, and I can draw like 150 million words out of all the. You say, but now let's start by getting your own story. I hear you say something about polio, that you're part of the polio survivors. Can you walk us through that journey? Tell us your story.
It's beautiful that I got birth. I was born 53 years ago, May 28, 1970 to be precise. And by the time I was 3 years old, of course, we know at that time immunization was not something that was
as prominent as
at that time. And so a lot of children at that time were exposed to measles, to polio, and chickenpox and what have you. And I was a victim of polio attack, and my parents didn't even know on time. And by the time the immunization was done, it was late. It was by both legs. And while my parents were going to school, I had a father who was an engineer. He thought it necessary when it happened then, even though he was an engineer, he was also exposed to the traditional ways of intervention at that time. So they went through the traditional ways of getting me back to my feet, not medical.
Okay.
Because the medical had failed. They saw me from walking to crippling, and it was not working. So ultimately, in the long run, I was like a late state starter. You know, traditional intervention wasn't working. Ultimately, I had to be carried by my mother, assisted by my mother while my parents were going to school. Until he walked into the church, prayer started. I got back my life because I was dying. And through life and history, I have lived my life as a person with disability who have succeeded in inspiring other children to live as a success story. Because all my life in Paris Secondary School, my secondary school, University Demonstration Secondary School in Benin, I was a little child with disability. But I was involved in sports. I was involved as a prefect. I was involved.
So it didn't deter you in any way
never,
at all?
You know, and even in my university days, my first degree, and when I furthered with the UN system, I never had any cause to allow myself. In the university system, I was a Congress president. I was president of the Road Track Club. I was, involved in academic work. I was involved in social, and I mean, I just saw myself as a living being. But by the time I left,
was that because? Sorry, I had to body. Was that because you already took it upon yourself that I am not this person people see me as? Because a lot of people will just confine themselves and just go back to their shell and say,
I was privileged to grow up in the environment, University of Benin. And I had a father who had friends like the late Professor Festus Iyayi, who was also former national president, the late Professor Sage, the living legend, the legendary son of Professor Issa Sage, Dr. Sage Bayo and Nimo Basi. These are intellectuals. And so the university system has exposed us to people whose mindset has been exposed intellectually to understanding and accommodating people as humans. You understand? And so it was a place for me to have children who are not living with disability, accommodating my interests, my concerns, my lifestyles, and bringing me into their own environment. And so I started in my class and being a child living with disability, working on a crutch, but then having children, people who never made mockery of me, who accepted me, allowed me to play football with them and everything. So by the time I walked into the university, my first degree was at the State University of Ekpoma. I realized at that time that the environment was just unfriendly for people with disability. We had a lot of people with disability on campus who didn't have access to the environment that was inaccessible. In fact, one of my roommates was a final year student at that time, had a wheelchair outside that was stolen. You know,
oh wow!
Yes, and he was a final year economics. The present minister for aviation, Festus Keyamo, who is also my friend, was a final year law while I was in 100 level. It led to my first demonstration that the wheelchair should be gotten, and it was an issue that led to consistent demonstration against injustice, infrastructures and everything. And we had access to library, access to toilet facilities, the hostel accommodation, the lecture theater and everything. So we started mobilizing ourselves around the need for us to ensure that the school system accommodates our needs and our concerns. And if we are going to have access to lecture, the lecture must be used on the ground floor.
All right.
Do you understand? And so that's how the whole campaign started. Before we knew, we integrated into the student union movement and started using to fight for student autonomy, the issue of rights of students, the issue of underfunding of the university system, and it became a national issue for me.
Okay, so before we go back to Tiffany and get her own experience from those that she has worked with, now I hear you say something about, you talked about the wheelchair, you talked about the toilets and all.
Yes.
I was speaking to someone yesterday, and then she told me, the first question she asked me before you came here was, does your building have a ramp? And in my mind, I'm like, okay, so it means that everyone who wants to have a building, a structure, probably a public structure, it means that your architect must include a ramp in that building. Talk to us about this.
It's fundamental because disability has no respect for any person. I mean, a friend of mine, Mr. Ibu, he's a Nollywood actor. God bless him. Recently he had 7 surgery and he got one of his limbs amputated. The likes of Chinua Achebe was born without disability, but before Chinua Achebe died, had a fatal accident, road accident, became a person with disability. And so the culture of buildings and the culture of development and the culture of governance must be inclusive. People must take into consideration the needs of the peculiarity of everybody. It's like we have the fat, we have the slim, we have the tall, we have the short. We're all humans, and that's what enriches the human diversity. So if we're building, people when they get old, like one of our friends, Dr. Mrs. Omokaro, is campaigning for the elderly, the old and the elderly. They may not be able to access the upstairs, the story building. Those who become, in the course of living in the kind of environment where we live in, some people have become people with disabilities through conflict, so through nutrition, maybe poor dieting, through some period, people who give birth to children, through lack of nutrients and what have you. So we've had issue of crisis, conflict. So what happens if a child that is born, you build a structure and then the structure is not inaccessible to people with disability? Ultimately, you have a road accident or a domestic, and then you can't access your library or your room. So people must begin to understand that they are not doing it. By the time I was born, we were less than 1 million people with disability in the country. But every single day, the population of people with disability seems to be increasing. Through poverty, through poverty, through conflict, through war, and what have you, through every form of, diseases and pestilence and what have you. So there's a need for us to begin to think of the government of, she just spoke about a beautiful presentation. She spoke about the Disability Act that was passed in 2018. There's a need, and funny enough, before the Disability Act, by 1993, during Babanga's regime, there was even a national policy for the people with disability that was integrated by Babanga's government in 1993. So if you look at 1993 to year 2000, when the campaign for the rights of people with disability started in this country, till 2019, when Buhari passed into Act, it's called that Nigerian system is a system that discriminates against the vulnerable group.
So we just only have the policies.
So we have we had been a policy until Buhari passed it into Act. Even when they are passed into Act, we're not even seeing the implementation of this policy. People are not even acting as if people who are living with disability have a right to life, have a right to self-determination, have a right to association, have a right to fulfilling their destiny. So that's why the movement comes in. That there's a need for people who are building transport, public transport owners. Even people that are doing communicators should be able to be trained to understand that there are people that are hearing impairment or those who are deaf. You have sign language interpreters to be able to accommodate their interests and their desires. And those who are building should also know that all public buildings, because we're talking about employment opportunity, 5% should be reserved for people with disability, should also accommodate people with disabilities. Your place here is beautiful. We are able to access it. But how many public buildings? More than 97 to 98% of public buildings and private buildings in Nigeria are not accessible. So you now begin to wonder why so many parents, many children with disabilities don't even have access to social life, have access to education, have access to employment opportunities. Because while some of them who become disabled or become people with disability at young age, parents don't even allow them to access education because they tell you most of the facilities around are not accessible. So they keep them inside the house.
Oh, wow. All right. So now let's come back to you, Tiffany Beauty. Tell us, with all people that you've actually experienced with, we've come Fusca to Fusca with, what are the experiences so far and how have you been able to deal especially we've heard his story saying how the how you have to battle to have inclusion even amongst people, not to even talk of the government. What's your story?
Well, you know that Nigeria is I shouldn't say Nigeria, no, some Nigerians are actually racist in terms of
Oh, so we are racist?
Not,
we always call
I mean, like, just
stop, yeah? No, I understand what you're saying.
You
know when it gets to UK, we're always very quick to say UK people are racist.
Not even just UK.
So you see,
some other countries too that are racist.
And even Nigeria.
In terms of people with disability, like there are some things that maybe in some involvement or some group of things that to be done, and maybe some people with disability are being introduced to it. Those that actually physically fit, maybe because they feel like, oh, why would this person be here? Oh, because of this, I'm going to opt out. Well, I've spoken with some people with disability. They've actually laid their complaints to me. There is a woman, actually, she said that she tried, that there was an entrepreneurship training. Actually, we run some entrepreneurship training too, but there's a group of people differently, because when I tried speaking with her, she thought maybe we were actually those organizations that did what she thought. So she said in the entrepreneurship training that she wanted to like go for that training, that when she got there, she developed that the venue of the place doesn't have a ramp, they can't access the place, so it was quite difficult for some of them that couldn't you know, go into the venue. So because of that, they had to go back, and then they felt really bad about it. And then in terms of public transport, like, you know, most of the buses now, they don't have how people
ramps.
People with wheelchair or so can access it. So some of them, they find it very difficult to use the public transport, because they say that, okay, the normal physical people now, when they're actually in the bus, they feel like those people are actually a burden to them, so that when the bus will try to like stop and pick them up, the passengers inside will keep complaining like
wasting our time.
Yes. So like, just go find another bus, or that kind of, you know how Nigerians actually react to things like that. I think Nigerians are actually people that actually they are not patient with some things, and people with disability are people that we have to carry along, because this, as he said, now he said that this is no respect of person. Anything can happen. Some people are not actually born with this thing. Some of them can be through accidents, can be through war, can be anything at all. So this thing can eventually fall on anybody. So we should actually learn the fact of loving ourselves, irrespective of whether the person is okay, or maybe the person have something different, or maybe the person is a disabled person. So we should learn to love them, because these people, they're actually complaining that they are not being involved in most of the decision makings in the country. So they are actually being sidelined. So they actually pleading that they would love for them to be included in some of these activities that have been happening. And as of the last election that just happened, there are some group of people, I think it's a Disability Foundation or committee, they were actually angry for the fact that they were not being appointed into any of the seats or any of the positions in the country. So they're actually just being like, why would they not be appointed? What happened? And is it because they say that they're actually humans too? So I just feel like we all should just, you know, embrace them and love them and show them the care and support them, because they're actually nice people.
Okay.
They're actually nice people. So we should actually love them and give them the respect that they desire, because it's not their fault that they're actually in that position. Anybody can be. So
all right, so I hear you say talk about this last election and how some people complain that they were not being included. So if you have to look at the works that you have done so far, how would you actually, have you been able to also fight for the same people, looking at the general election? Because I remember INEC always came out to say that yes, they're including people with disabilities, they had the magnifying glasses, they had all of that. What was it like during all this election, even the off-cycle election? And how have you been able to fight for these persons, that's people with disability?
Well, we're trying our best. We are not the ones in the positions, but we'll try our best. We keep speaking for them, and it's you just know how things are being done in Nigeria. If you can talk for a long while, but whatever they want to do, they're the people in the position, whatever they want to do, they will do what they want to do. So these people, we've tried to speak for them. We've said a lot. We've tried to just push them in, but it seems like, I don't know. It seems
the more
like,
you're trying, the more it gets stiffer.
So, but we will still keep pushing. It's not
All
just we still keep pushing because based on the off-cycle election, the last election that happened, we just noticed. I don't know, because in Nigeria things are really hard. So we try our best because people that are there will make their decision, whatever they want to say.
All right. Clearly, there's still more we can unbundle from this conversation with my guests, Tiffany Beauty and Emeka. And definitely, we'll get right into it after this short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
We've trained some of them in some kind of entrepreneurial training, like maybe how to do all these handworks, because this Nigeria actually, it's a country whereby the voice of the women are not being heard.
I've seen so many of them, but then there's this one that really stuck to me. Every day I wake up, I remember that video, and I just tell myself that you are not even doing enough. A particular lady, she doesn't have hands, she used her mouth to braid hair. That was when I realized that I am not doing anything, even with my two hands.
And then she was on treatment. And then we're there battling in the hospital, at a teaching hospital, on treatment. And then a senior doctor came later and said all the treatment she's been on for 3 weeks was wrong.
Oh, wow.
And then ultimately we lost our mother.
And that's where they tell you, Nigeria never happened to you. Welcome back. If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We're reaching you from KAFTAN's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. If you just joined us, you've actually missed out on a whole lot, but then you can still join in the second half of the conversation. My guest on the show today, I have two guests. My first guest is Tiffany Beauty Bright, who is a dedicated communication officer at the African Center for Entrepreneurship and Information Development. And we also have right here in the studio, Emeka Betram, who is Executive Director, Persons with Disability Action Network Nigeria. Okay, and he's also a Human Rights Ambassador, National Human Rights Commission, Abuja, Nigeria. All right, great. So before we went on that break, we've actually talked to Tiffany, but let's come back to you. Speaking about the elections, let's return back to either the general elections. I knew I had so many conversations with INEC staffs, the INEC Commission themselves. I remember talking to the former National Commissioner, that's Festus Okoye, on so many occasions. He assured us that people with disabilities are included in the election, regardless. So they were not being marginalized. But then, two questions, and I'd like you to unbundle them in one breath. Now, if you have to look at that general election, all that happened during the general election, coming down to this off-cycle election a few days ago, would you actually say that people with disabilities coming from either the electoral umpire or from the political parties or even from the electorate, Nigerians, were they included in all that happened during these elections? That's one on the side. Then secondly, I always say to people, it's not enough for you to come out and say that I am a woman, so I must be given a governorship seat. It's not enough for you to say that just because I'm someone living with disability, so I must be given that position. What exactly are these people doing, especially the PLWDs? What are they doing to ensure that I'm worth getting that seat? I deserve that position, and I must get it.
Thank you very much. First question is, what have people with disability done in terms of engaging with the political structures, the electoral process structure, the INEC, to be able to make their voice count? It's very interesting when you look at the election in a country. She said something which is true, and that is, you look at the formation of the political parties. We had the issue of the military militarizing our polity, taking over the country. And by 1999, when Abdulsalam Baka was handing over, they had the Constitution Drafting Committee 26 men drafted the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. There wasn't any inclusion of anyone. And there was not even a person with disability. And because many persons who were civil rights people, ambassadors or civil rights activists and people who were campaigning for the disengagement of the military from the polity, never believed that the military were going to disengage from power. But what they did was, they thought, because they've always had this culture of overthrowing, their thoughts of handing over, refused to participate. So those who took over the political space or took over the political structures from their political parties were those who were never involved in the struggle for Nigerian liberation. And so it was easy for them to be able to mobilize funds, mobilize money, and then take over ownership of the political parties. And if you look at what has happened from 1999 till date, and that's why you see there's been less inclusion. Much of the women who have been in political platform campaigning and advocating, as much as the fact that they've done their very much best to mobilize and sensitize the sense of sensibility of other Nigerian women, Nigerian political stakeholders, to understand that you cannot have a country have sustainable development without having women inclusion. Many of them have become disenfranchised. You understand? So it is with the people with disability. When the election was coming, a lot of people with disability organizations have been on the ground campaigning for inclusion. But again, too, there's this culture of divide and rule within the disability community.
Really?
As in again, in the women's group. We realize that most of the people who came into political party as governors, as chairmen of local governments, occupying position of authorities, most of them ended up establishing civil rights group or organizations, non-organization, advocating for the rights of women, and the campaign for women wasn't the rights of women, wasn't the rights, self-determination for women, wasn't the issue of autonomy of women. These people came in to play the role of divide and rule for women's quest for emancipation and recognition. And that's the reason why most times when women are campaigning for recognition, some other people are in the forefront campaigning for them, as if they are campaigning for them. Ultimately, in the long run, when it comes to last minute, they capitulate and they start campaigning for the men. So it is with the disability community. You have disability groups, you have people who have also used their resources to set up disability group because of the love for humanity. There's also some other people who have used it as a means of self-enrichment.
Oh, really?
To drive, yes. Because
so
of the
some
fact
people are even still cashing out from this?
Yes. You understand? Because they talk about relationship with development partners, international organizations, and what have you, some of them who are interested in how to make life count, how to make voices of reasoning count, how to make people win their right to self-determination. So disability organizations came together to say, okay, there's a need. First of all, he has been a friend of mine for over 25 years. And I know that he did his very best for INEC. But one of the things that if you look at the INEC formation and the enthronement of the characters, most of the characters are in INEC. You look at the issue of the transparency of the elections that we've had. The February election that we are talking about, what happened in that February elections? A lot of people, the political party had their manifestos, which some of them were even using to galvanize. They're saying they have a place and for representation of people with disabilities. But when it came to the time of purchasing forms were being sold for 50 million naira. Forms were being sold for 40 million naira. And outside that, you have to engage. You have to start reaching out to people spending. People spent about 2.5 billion naira just to win their primaries. So from that onset, the voice of women, the voice of people with disability couldn't have been able to win because many of them lack the financial capital to even engage that process.
So what did you do in that regard, letting them understand at least it should be either free or subsidized?
What we did was, beyond the fact that we have engaged National Assembly, we passed the bill, was to speak to their sense of sensibility, that look, our voice must count. And then, unfortunately for us, because like I was talking about the fact that President Buhari became president, by the time he was running an election, the first manifesto, by 2006, I am the first Nigerian with disability to run for a political party. I'm the first person with disability to chair a registered political party. I chaired the Progressive People Alliance, PPA, in Edo State when Ojikalu was running for presidency under the Progressive People Alliance in 2006. And so in that kind of interaction, it means that we have enabled people to outside who are not living with disability to know that some of us are intellectual, we can do some things. But by the time we came back to 2023, you discover that what has happened to people with disability community. Most of us who are living with disability began to realize that people could not even believe that we have capacity to play the role in the political sphere. Because they saw that when President Buhari passed the bill, he came in and did something. He had an office for a special advisor on people with disability. Prior to his election, I drafted a bill, a document for people with disability into the through my friend, the former APC National Chairman, Chief John Oyegun, I handed over the document to him for a placement, for an inclusion, for a mainstreaming of people with disability into political party. He came in, had an interaction with President Buhari, who brought in Sam Ankali as a special advisor. Ankali was special advisor to President Buhari for 8 years. Not one person with disability had impartation.
Oh, wow.
Our lives were not, never had any meaning. And that's why you could see things that happened. Something like 82 billion naira was used to buy mosquito nets during the COVID-19. You could see things like 1.4 billion naira was spent by government on that time for hand washing. You understand? You could see the amount of money that was used for spoon feeding, home feeding children by the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and what have you, in collusion with the Special Office of the Special Advisor. A lot of people with disability who have gone through school remain unemployed, their voice remained silenced. Many were sexually abused. Many were disenfranchised and what have you. So because that office never did anything, and I still
it was just one audio office.
The office was just, and that's one thing government keeps doing. We have a commission of people with disability tomorrow. But if you go to the commission now, you are intellectual. Most of the best media men that we have today, you want to assess them, they will tell you, even though you have people with disability running that commission, they will tell you that you have to fix an appointment to see them. Being run by James Lalu, who is the Civil Secretary of the Commission from Plateau State. He started from Plateau State that had passed a bill on a commission. So when you see people who are being pushed to the forefront, people who are being used to advocate for the rights of people with disability, most of them are people that are lackeys. People that government feel they can manipulate, they can use, they can,
and then just use them for campaigns.
Subjugate their rights, use them for their campaign. Ultimately, in the long run, you just bring in people, just bring in people because they are people with disability does not mean they understand the issue of the rights of people with disability to stand for us, So we saw the lack of transparency in the election. We saw the low level of political consciousness in the community of people with disability, many of them in rural communities, resulting from several years of repression and dehumanization. And so you saw many of them didn't have access to information. In rural communities where 90% of people with disability are living, not some of us who have access to 5-star hotels, have access to flying across the Atlantic, have access to a fine media outfit like this. Many of them are in rural communities, many of them didn't have access to information. You understand? The National Orientation Agency didn't do much. And so, even when INEC brought us to engaging with them, having access to magnifying glasses for people with albinism, how many people with disability have access to wheelchairs? How many people with disability community that are people that are deaf have access to interpreters to understand? National organizations, they did carry out their homework to reaching out to such communities across the length and breadth of country. Do we have any commissioner in charge of the concerns of people with disability in the country?
So we're actually hoping that since we now have a new...
Now that we have the administration, and the joy of it is that as far as Bola Ahmed Tinubu as president, when he was running the presidency, the election, there was this campaign that people were making jest of him that he was too weak to win the presidency. And of us at that time made some strong statement that if people begin to make jest of Mr. President based on his mental health, that means people like us that are living with disability may not have access to political power. And some of us spoke against it vehemently. He came into power. And I think one of the things that he has done, he has brought a lot of youths into government. I'm not a political party, I'm not a member of any political party, but he has also brought in, just last week, he brought in one Alhaji Issa as a special advisor on people with disability. So one of the things we want to do is to utilize his intellectuality, this opportunity to engage that same commission of the commission of people with disability led by that James Ladu and our civil society organizations and the media to understand that we have a disability act that has been passed. It has 1 year, it's a 5 years transition.
And it's not going to be business as usual.
So that we must begin to engage the process.
All right.
It goes beyond the issue of budgets, the issue of training programs, the issue of education, inclusive education for people with disability. Because even in the last dispensation we heard about a girl or some girls in school for the blind in Jabi and in Kuje being raped by their teachers. The issue was taken as far as the National Assembly. And up to today, we can't even understand what came out of it. So we are going to be thinking of raising the capacity of those actors in the commission.
Okay.
To understand that some of us who are running this project are not running our project because we live by it. We are running because it is not people's disability life. It counts. Yeah. It's our life. It is not a ceremony for
okay. Okay, sorry I had to butt in there. Now, that takes me to the next question I asked you, that it is not enough for me to say just because I've got long hairs, just because I've got boobs and butts, that makes me a woman, and then definitely I deserve a particular position. So now, if I was now speaking for those people with living with disabilities, it is not just because the person is in a wheelchair or has cerebral palsy or autism that means we should he or she should be pitied and given a position. How would those people by themselves? I see you that you are able to come out from that corner where you decide you don't want to box yourself into a corner. But for some persons also that are watching you right now and say, I'm disabled, I just have to sit down in one place. We keep hearing there is ability in every disability. So how do you talk to such persons too?
You see, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Our lives are connected to one another. As long as one man is not free, we're all not free. And that's the reason why every one of us, those living with disability and those not living with disability, must work together for the liberation of Nigeria. Nigeria right now is in a state of topsy-turvy. Nigeria is in a state of quagmire. Nigeria is in a state of crisis. And that's when we talk about inclusive governance, we talk about the inclusion of people with disability, it matters. One of the things we're doing is, engaging, the political process. I know some couple of weeks ago, I got involved with the civil society leaders, for social protection in Nigeria, led by our own distinguished intellectual Dr. T.V. Buzo, former country director of Action Aid, who has been a mentor and a friend for the past 30 years. And we got involved with the Minister for Budget and National Planning to see how we can intervene in the lives of vulnerable people in the country. And so we also use it as a platform to reach out to other people. We have some organizations of disability outside persons with disability. We're building a coalition of people with disability to reach out to our communities of people with disability in rural communities. We're engaging traditional rulers, we're engaging religious leaders, parents with children with disability. Few years ago, I had the opportunity of relating with Ayat Foundation, owned by the wife of Yaya Bello, whose child is autistic, and we spoke about to parents living with children with disability that there's a need for us to have form a political movement. We need to have a movement that will be so encompassing that will integrate the rights of people with disability, so that we can begin to build and mobilize resources to help people with disability. Many of them don't have access to crutches and wheelchairs. Many of them have access to education. If we can reach out to those who are in school, arrange trust
funds. Are you reaching out to them or they are reaching out to you? I
have a disability club at University of Benin for the past 10 years, registered for students with disability. If I went, Professor Emmanuel Wanzi was Vice Chancellor of University of Benin. That's when we established the club. Okay. So we reach out to them. You understand? December 3rd is the International Day for People with Disability. It's also a platform for us to be able to reach out so that local governments, we have focal persons, supervisory counselors and others who begin to reach out to students, children and parents with people with disability, so they bring them out of their homes so that they can access opportunities, microcredit opportunities. She spoke about entrepreneurship opportunities. If they have skills, they can become independent. Their voice can be loud and clear. They cannot be exposed to this social issue of money politics of buying and selling votes, because they are independent. But as long as you leave them pulverized, poor, they become vulnerable. And so they keep selling their votes and selling their dignity and their humanity.
Right. All right, so let's come back to you, Tiffany Beauty. I understand that your work with African Center for Entrepreneurship and Information Development reflects your commitment to fostering an environment where women are actively involved in decision-making processes and economic initiatives. And through your efforts, you seek to create opportunity where women, to enable women to thrive as entrepreneurs and leaders, contributing to social economic growth in Nigeria. I saw a particular video where I've seen so many of them, but then there's this one that really stuck to me. Every day I wake up, I remember that video, and I just tell myself that you are not even doing enough. A particular lady, she doesn't have hands, she used her mouth to braid hair. That was when I realized that I am not doing anything, even with my two hands. Someone with no hands was going that far. So how are you, what is the engagement that you have with women when you come when you come to meet them, or when they come to meet you? What kind of engagement do you have with them? What kind of work or service do you actually render to the people with disabilities?
All right, thank you. So in my organization, ASIDEF, that's African Center for Entrepreneurship and Information Development, it's our work and our duty to make sure we reach out to those women in rural areas that who can actually, they can actually become leaders. So we reach out to them in entrepreneurship. We have we've trained some of them in some kind of entrepreneurial training, maybe how to do all these handworks, because this Nigeria actually, it's a country whereby the voice of the women are not being heard. So our work now, we try to reach out to them in our own way. So because that the colonization of Nigeria, it just only few women that were actually being franchised. That was in 1950s, not until after like close to 20 years, 1979, even after independence, 1979, that was where they actually reached out to some women. But even though that there are some women actually in politics or in the ministry, but it's not actually all their voices that are being heard. It seems like these women don't actually, maybe when they try to voice out the issues of women, but they are being sidelined because they feel like women, most of Nigeria, they have this mentality that women's work are just to like give birth to child
and the other room.
Yeah, sure. So they women, we actually try to like reach out to them, so in actually telling them that women have the right to education, they have right to healthcare, they have the right to every other thing. So
are these the words that you tell those women when you congregate? Because a lot of women will even tell you that I'm a woman, I'm not supposed to go that far.
No, actually, so these women, when we reach out to them, I try to encourage them and tell them that in the sense that you're a woman doesn't just mean that you should just sit down in one place and then feel like your husband will just go out there and do everything. You as a woman, you can actually support your husband. So in this sense, we are going to train you on maybe anything you want. We ask them, what do you want? What kind of hand job do you want to learn? Some of them will tell you that, oh, they want to learn sewing. Some of them will tell you, oh, they want to learn soap making. They want to learn catering. So we try to reach out to them. In as much as me myself, I'm also a caterer. So I'm actually a caterer and also an event planner. So in my organization, with that right, I actually understand the pain of women because I'm actually a lady, so I understand how they feel. So when we reach out to them, we train them on these skills. We train them on these skills, and then we group them. We group them in different.
Is this a voluntary service or paid for?
Sometimes it's actually voluntary, and sometimes we partner with some organizations to reach out to them. Like we partner with an organization called CESDA, that's a Center for Entrepreneurship and Sustainable Development Agency. So we partner with them, and then we train these women. So when we train them, after training them, we'll follow up with them, because women, how they can be. After training them, some of them will just go sleep back on it. So we'll follow them, and then we put some ladies that some leaders that will actually take up to anything that is happening, so that we can, through them, we'll be able to reach out and then know how they are going with their trainings. So because sometimes if you train them and then the first round maybe they're able to sell off what they did, and then afterwards they just use the money and then they don't just continue. So we'll follow up with them and make sure that they continue and then they don't just go back. So we trying to create and then empower these women. We are trying to just lift up some burdens and make sure that the environment is actually being friendly with women in terms of entrepreneurship and and if we are talking about the political aspect now, we know that there are some women who love to go into politics, because in the sense that there are actually budget for this, but the budget actually doesn't mean that, fostering budget doesn't mean that all rights of men should be the same rights to women. At least it mustn't be equal, So but there's...
Oh, are you preaching against? I thought women are always saying there must be equality, equity and equality. Are you then telling them that no,
we didn't say
men are men, women are women?
No, actually there should be equality, actually, but you know how it is now. So some women actually wants to get more. So in this
sense, bad to want more?
We try. It's not bad to want more, but some women actually want to get higher things. That's one thing we have with women. Some women actually now, they don't. There's no women stuff looking out for each other. There's always a conflict. In the sense.
So you agree to that belief or mentality that women don't like themselves?
No, not really. The thing is that imagine there is a group of women and then there is a woman leader, and then maybe that woman leader is trying to tell them something to do, and then you know how women can be, they'll be like, no, so we'll agree to it, and then someone will disagree to it. So now the issue is, how do we now come together and make sure that they all agree to this
and support someone?
Yes.
All right.
So
our time is fast spent, but before we finally let you go, would get your final note, Emeka, on the fact that you talked about polio. Would like you to talk to our viewers, because I still know some persons who believe that in some part of the country, I'm not going to mention name, they'll tell you that I'm not taking that polio vaccine because they want to use it to, they have so many belief. I'm not going to bring up those ones again. So because you have experienced it, would like to get your last word to parents, especially in that regard.
First of all, I must thank you once again, and of course use this platform to encourage parents. It's like recently when they spoke about this issue of cervical cancer between the age of 9 to 14. My last child is 13 years old. I got encouraged, though I had a lot of people saying it wasn't right, but I had to use my access to information, relationship with media, and of course medical practitioners to know that it was vital, and I had to act. I don't need, you understand, to ensure that my daughter gets the vaccine. So it is important that
access to information.
Yes, to
Great.
ensure that parents realize that the issue of polio is real, and we must expose our children to it. But I must finally thank and use the platform, like some states have passed their laws, they have commissions on people with disability. The Lagos State government has a special law for people with disability. The Plateau State have, Bauchi State have, Nasarawa State, Kwara State have, Kogi State, Jigawa, Kaduna, Kano, Sokoto, Anambra, Abia, Zamfara States. And these state governors are using that same commissions to also wake up the sense of sensibility, the state of awareness of their people of their citizens to the issue of polio is real, so that we get all the vaccinations that are needed against rubella, against measles, and all the rest of them. Some people that you see that are blind today are products of measles, so that ultimately in the long run we don't exacerbate disability population. But finally, I want to
before you end on that thought, because now I remember that there's also this misconception about the vaccine.
Yes.
So kindly talk to us on that.
That's why I spoke about the issue of awareness. And the more they are aware, because the vaccine is real. I mean, once you take it, you're safe.
Sorry again, I know that someone will tell you. I was having one argument with someone, and then he stated that it was even the vaccine that he took that even made him crippled.
No, but the problem we have is most of the trained hands, most of the medical trained hands or hands that we have today, because of the lack of facilities, and because of the lack of facilities in our institutions and our research centers and even in our hospitals, many of the medical personnel, many of them are not trained. You understand? It's like many people who have gone as far as carried out blood transfusion. You're donating blood. Some have had in cost of donating blood. The same blood they donated to their spouses were not used for their spouses.
Yeah.
You understand? Right. And you discover that the bloods are being in the bank, that have been contaminated, and so on have been used.
Oh, wow.
So you've also had medical professionals or personnel, many of them who are not, they may not understand what you're doing in the course of the vaccination, may have ripple effect, on those people. I've seen people, my mother was treated by doctors. She had to carry out she had oxygen. She was on oxygen. From oxygen, she went to dialysis and what have you. And then she was on treatment. And then we're there battling in the hospital, at the teaching hospital, on treatment. And then a senior doctor came later and said all the treatment she's been on for 3 weeks was wrong.
Oh, wow.
And then ultimately we lost our mother.
And that's where they tell you, Nigeria never happened to you.
So that's why. So when we're talking about all this, that's why sometimes we pray we're able to reach out to the right doctors. During the COVID, I wasn't feeling fine. I went to the hospital for treatment. The doctor said, you had COVID, you have to take it to Kwagala. I said, no, I'm just feeling, I have fever. And it became an issue. And then in 2019, I resisted it, went home, ate my food, came back. By the time I met another doctor who's a professional, I mean, no, it's fever. And I was okay. So some doctors are in a hurry because of this issue of primitive activity. They want to make money by every means.
So it all boils down to access.
Some of them, if you go to the hospital, I don't want to mention some hospitals. Even when my mother died, they couldn't trace her medical case file. Not only for her, people that are dying in hospital, they can't trace. Doctors are treating people without medical case file.
All right.
Because they know that if anything happens, you may sue them. So it's happening. So most people
it all
who
boils
take the
down
vaccine,
to medical
medical negligence too.
And
medical
they get
negligence, lack of professionals, you know, and the vaccines that are available. If you take a vaccine that is not meant for you at the wrong time, you may have an issue. You understand?
All right,
so those are the issues.
All right.
But I want to call on the disability organizations that we must need to collaborate, build our capacities, and engage the government of the day, because we know that most of the reason why people don't come out for whether women or people with disabilities don't come out to participate in the election is because of the fact that we realize that political victories are decided through violence. What happened in Imo State? What happened in Kogi State? What happened in Bayelsa State is a case study. You understand? So we must ensure that the NINEC, NOA, National Orientation Union, and we keep waking up the sense, you know, the awareness that violence is not what we need. We need good governance. We need, you know, and we must also ensure that the issue of manipulation, widespread electoral abuses, you know, money in politics are stopped, are not encouraged.
All
you know, so once we do that within our disability community, we're able to put our first 11 in front, and we're able to get ourselves built and know that the race is beautiful. When the more the merrier, we work together with women organizations, work with other vulnerable group, you know, and engage government.
All right.
We can get the best for our community.
Right. All right. So, Tiffany, let's get your last word, especially with regards to women inclusion.
Okay, thank you. So, in the aspect of the women inclusion, we know that women actually have the right to everything. That's the right to education, the right to information, the right to free medical health care, the right to major things that, you know, that in fact the right to anything at all. So there shouldn't be any
Right to
form
education.
Yes, sure. There shouldn't be any form of discrimination, in the sense that, you know, before now, it seems like, yeah, I've said it before, so let me not just say it again, for the fact that they just feel like women's thing is just to be at home and nothing at all. So just know that these women, actually, they need more. They want their voice to be heard. Yeah.
Great. It's been a wonderful conversation. What a fine place to anchor this conversation. Thank you so much, Emeka Betram, Executive Director, Persons with Disability Action Network Nigeria, and Human Rights Ambassador, the National Human Rights Commission, NHRC. It's been a wonderful time having this talk with you.
Thank you.
Also, thank you so much, Tiffany Bright, Communication Officer at the African Center for Entrepreneurship and Information Development. Thank you so much for your time with us.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for sharing your stories.
Thank you.
All right, viewers, I'm sure you must have been rightly educated, entertained, and informed. I will definitely see you next time. Like they already say, that do not throw shades or do not insult anyone living with disability. If you have to talk to them, please talk to them nicely and with so much respect. If you respect yourself, then respect people around you. I will see you next time. My name is Annabelle Oji. God bless you and yours, and God bless Nigeria.